Good evening. We're calling this meeting of the Barrington Town Council to order at 7:07. I would ask that Troop 6 please come forward to lead the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd ask the residents to stand, please. Thank you. Troop 6. The next item on our agenda is announcements, and I'll ask our town manager, Jim Green, to take us through those, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. This Saturday, December 7th, at between 2 and 5:30, we'll be celebrating the holiday Barrington Glows. There'll be children's activities between 2 and 5. Santa will arrive at 5, and we'll have a tree-lighting ceremony. Barrington Middle School and Barrington High School choir groups will also be attending. So everyone's welcome here at Town Hall to help celebrate the holiday season. On Tuesday, December 24th, Christmas Eve, town offices will close at noon. They'll also be closed on Wednesday, 25th, Christmas Day, and Wednesday, New Year's Day. That's all I have, sir.
We will also be holding our January town council meeting on, instead of a Monday, it will be Tuesday, January 7th at 7 p.m. in the council chambers. The first item on the substantive item we have is to discuss and act on our policy regarding reappointments. I wanted to put this here because we have a number of reappointments that we'll be making that are on the consent agenda. And I'll ask Councilor Breyer to, this was something that he was interested in talking about.
So in noticing how we reappoint people who served on the boards and commissions, when a term is up, if they've been participating in meetings, they're automatically put up for reappointment. And we have some boards and commissions that tend to be full. And so in doing so, we're in a sense preventing anybody else in town from even knowing that they could potentially serve in a role that might benefit the town. And I think we do a disservice toward overall engagement through that practice. And so what I'd like to see happen is, as we're approaching the end of somebody's term, if the potential vacancies could be listed on the town site like they ordinarily are for full vacancies. And if applications come in for those positions, then it would be a decision on who to appoint. And certainly we want to recognize the experienced people, bring the historical knowledge that they gain from serving, but we also might find other people who can serve well in that capacity. And if people don't apply for those positions, then we can reappoint without them having to come back in and reapply for a job they already have. But I think it can promote more engagement to let the public know that there is a term that's expiring, because it's not, they are terms that expire, they're not continuous. I'm curious on your thoughts.
Actually, I think that may be what we did for a while. The problem, I think we changed it because, first of all, sometimes it's not that easy to have people volunteer. And if you have new applicants come in and we reappoint the existing or the previous member, it makes the people that have come in feel like it was a done deal, that it was a waste of their time, actually. Would you assume that the expired term applicant would come in for an interview as well?
I envision that they would if there were other applicants as well.
All I know is that we did do it that way, and we changed it because of people feeling like it was a soft offer.
So we do have vacancies for other boards and positions. One of the hard decisions that we had to make, we made in the case of the Newport Council, was to decide if we did highly qualified candidates. Ended up having to disappoint someone. And our volunteer, we couldn't run this town without our volunteers, and we would increase that they are fantastic. We have some people who volunteer for years, and which are Songbird is a very good example of that, honoring her tomorrow night. And I think that that experience certainly was valuable. I really hate the idea of saying to someone, thank you for your years of service. We don't need you anymore, even though you want to serve. I should say that they're not automatically put up. Every time they come up for the expiration of their term, they are first asked if they're interested in reappointment. And it's only if they say that they are interested in reappointment that they're put on there. And we've also asked for recommendations from the chair and of the liaison to people to get their input. My own view is that we don't have, this is not really a problem. I have experienced, I haven't had people come up to me and say, I really want to be on the planning board. And it's often the other way around, where I'm trying to twist someone's arm to get them to volunteer for a vacant position. If we had a situation where there were people lining up for these things, we'd certainly interview them. But I don't know that I want to create a situation where we've got to say no to somebody by recruiting someone to replace an existing member. I don't want to recruit someone to replace an existing member as opposed to recruiting someone to fill a vacant spot.
But with an expired term, it is a vacant spot. Once you have the expiration come and go, it's a vacant spot because they weren't appointed for as long as they want to serve. They were appointed for a certain duration. And so I'm suggesting you don't recruit somebody to replace somebody. You recruit somebody because you have a vacancy forthcoming, and you can engage more people that way, as opposed to somebody saying, gee, I'd like to be on, say, the Harbor Commission. There's not a vacancy there, so they look next month, not a vacancy there. They look next month, not a vacancy there, and then they get discouraged. And so they never engage. For example, the terms are they 3-year terms usually for the boards and commissions?
Yeah, it varies. Yeah.
So the people whose terms are expiring now, Councillor Boyajian has voted for some of them, but not others. I haven't appointed any of them, and Councillor Hearn hasn't appointed any of them. And so we just, heard our solicitor share how important appointments are, and we're reappointing people who we've never interviewed.
Oh, I think that's a different issue. And
Yeah,
that's why I asked
absolutely.
if you wanted to interview anyone. And I asked Councilor Hearn if she wanted to interview anyone because they hadn't been appointed. But I view that as a very different issue than the issue of replacing folks. I hear what you're saying. It's not technically a replacement, but how do you think the person on that board is going to feel?
Well,
and how do you
imagine...
think, let me just finish. And the rest of the folks on that board, when they see, after years of service, I got fired. And I think that's how they'll see it.
But let's say the interview doesn't go well, and I would want to not vote for somebody. With this method, my choice is to vote no. I'd rather have nobody serve because nobody else even knew they could apply, as opposed to, I would rather somebody else with a different skill set or background serve. So right now, if we're interviewing people to either reappoint or not reappoint, then we're saying no, you're fired, as opposed to saying, we've had the same group of people here, let's see if some new ideas, some new perspective can, move the town in a different direction or bring this board or commission up to the next level.
I still think that what you're saying by doing that is you just couldn't cut it. You couldn't bring it to the next level. And there are folks who've done astounding work for our town and who are still ready, willing, and able to serve.
And I think that we could recognize that by reappointing them through a process that lets other people apply, as opposed to doing a favor for somebody who's worked for who's volunteered for the town and reappointing them.
I just want to point out that in the past we have disagreed on appointments. It hasn't happened for a while, but I remember when Steve Premiano was on, that we disagreed with who we wanted to appoint. And let me tell you, it was awkward to say no, and then someone, or no one second an appointment. But it can be done. I agree with Mike that it would be like feeling like they had been fired. And if you want to meet the people who are appointed, then we should certainly request interviews of people that are going to be reappointed.
And we can even
done
do that
before.
We can even do that for these folks, although I would do it, we can't do it tonight because we didn't ask them to be present. And I would probably do it over the course of a couple of meetings because it does look like it's a fair amount of people. But I would say that I'm not aware of people wanting to be on a board that just haven't applied because they haven't seen it advertised. That may be something that you've seen. I just haven't seen that in my time on the council. If somebody approaches me about wanting to serve, it's usually been pretty general, and then I've pushed them towards a spot where I think they do a good job. The other thing I think is one of the assumptions that we make with these reappointments are that the person is not only attending meetings, but really contributing and doing good work. That's why we ask for recommendations. There are times when we see problems, and when that happens, we will ask someone not to reapply or suggest that if they did, they might not get the votes in those circumstances. But most of the time, we have highly competent people doing great volunteer work who want to continue. Positions open up because people generally can't do it. It's a big commitment for a lot of folks. So their positions do open up, and it's at that time when I think we should be appointing folks. But I'm certainly happy to have all of these folks come in for interviews as well. And if there were people who had applied for positions, we'd certainly interview them.
I would also just suggest these meetings are all open to the public. If there's somebody who wants to be on the Harbor Commission, my husband wanted to be on the Harbor Commission. He went to meetings for a year. He wasn't on the commission, he just would sit in the audience. So part of it is, it's a great way to understand the committee and what they work on. And it's, you know, when an opening comes up, you've got the background knowledge to be, you know, at the ready. So I know what you're trying to do is be more inclusive, and to everybody out there, I'd say the inclusive way is we've got a million boards and commissions. Every issue that you're interested in, you can find a spot to be present at. And certainly when, you know, openings open up and it really, you know, behooves you to, you know, get out there and get your name certainly in the pile of people who are interested in it, and showing that commitment of being there even when you're not necessarily a voting member.
I have seen that. And not all of our committees even take substantive votes to make recommendations every time. I mean, the planning board certainly does, but you know, energy will do maybe one. They recommend to the council to do X. And so that means that if any member of the public is there, generally it's very informal and people just speak up. So there's already participation. So I think there were two issues, and we can certainly keep talking about them, but one of them was, should we re-interview or interview for the first time for two of you, these members of the boards and commissions that are listed in item 6, and how do we feel about that? I'm open to that.
I'm fine with that, especially since many of these people have served for quite some time. I think it would be helpful for other members of the council to meet our municipal court judge, you know. And if we could vote, we would vote on reappointments, and you could express your, you know, how you felt towards any of these individuals.
Well, it's not just about how I feel about the individuals, it's how I feel about the process that excludes new people from being able to join in.
Well, I don't think it does.
I know you don't. Like, that's what we're talking about. I do, and you don't. And we can disagree.
Sure. I don't think it does because I'm not aware of a single person who's wanted to join who hasn't been able to. So it's a solution in search of a problem, in my opinion.
I've been told the problem. I've been told by 3 people. One of them I convinced to apply for another board, and she's serving on it. And the other 2, one of them almost applied this time around but decided not to, and another one was frustrated and decided not to.
Okay. Well, they can always submit an application.
To a position that doesn't exist? I mean, if you look on the site and there's no vacancy, what do you submit the application to?
You can submit the application to the clerk. Anyone can, at any time, and then they're kept on file.
And that's an excellent way in years where it's difficult to recruit people. It's great to have a list of people who are interested, that they can be reached out to when there does become a vacancy. I think that's one of the things we decided with that Newport,
to keep
the other applicant on file, because a lot of people change, you know, they move, all sorts of life changes, and they can't serve their term. And there was somebody that is interested in this position and could be drawn from.
So, going back to that first issue, do we want to interview? I don't need to, but I don't have any objection to if any other member of the council wants to.
I don't.
You don't want to?
I don't want to interview somebody that doesn't have something they're actually interviewing for. If the vacancy isn't
To
posted.
meet them, to,
I can go to the meeting and meet them. I mean,
Okay.
I don't want to ceremonially bring somebody in here to interview for an automatic appointment.
Well, I mean, we could always vote no, right? So, I mean, we have a number of people who are up for reappointment. Looking at the list, I think I've worked with either as liaison or in some other capacity, probably about, I don't know, half or two-thirds of them. I haven't heard from any of you that there are any complaints about the performance of the other ones. I assume they're as conscientious as the rest of our volunteers, and sometimes they miss meetings because they have work or family obligations, but that never bothers me at all. You know, but if we had reservations or felt we didn't know enough, we should interview them and vote. You know, do we want to reappoint them or not? I don't want to turn it into a game of Survivor, though, where, you know, people I think would be hesitant to apply for the position thinking, well, I get appointed to fill an unexpired term that might be a year, only to have someone come in a year later and apply, and I've been to 6 meetings and I get kicked off, and what good did it all do?
Right.
And I don't want to make people feel like that. If they're willing to help, that's great. For people who are waiting for an opening, I think Joy's suggestion is just right. I mean, I've never been to a committee meeting where they haven't said, oh, what are you here for? You want to, you know, talk about it? And their ideas are welcome at the table. If there's someone out there who's bursting at the seams with good ideas, you know, service to the town isn't getting appointed to the board. Service to the town is, you know, volunteer your ideas. And I'm sure everyone would be thrilled to have you on the board once they hear all the great ideas you have. So, you know, I mean, I don't think it's ceremonious to say we want to interview someone we don't know enough about to vote one way or another. But I don't personally feel, unless any of you have reservations about the people on this list, that I need to hear from any of them. The ones I'm familiar with, they do a great job.
I would agree. I mean, the boards that I've been liaison with, I think every one of the candidates are an easy vote for me. And I don't think I need to interview them. You know, I think it's a pretty open and welcoming process. And, you know, I don't really have a reservation about voting this block of appointments. But I certainly, if you've got a problem with a candidate, speak up.
Mr. President, if I could just add that I did contact on this particular list every chair and liaison and asked for their inputs. Many of you gave me inputs. There were no negative responses at all. They were all very positive for all these particular candidates. And I'd also like to remind the council that we start our process where every year the committee chair gives an annual report for your review that includes attendance and their initiatives and agendas for the year ahead. So there is some oversight by all of you on all of these commissions as to how the performance of the members are doing.
Right. I guess if I'm understanding Councilor Breyer correctly, what he's not saying there's a problem, therefore we need to replace these people. He's just saying I'd like to see new people come through on these boards.
At least being able, knowing that the potential to serve on them exists at a certain point in time, that time being the expired term. It's not that when somebody's term is up, they're done, see you later. It's knowing what the cycle is. Just like all of our terms have an expiration date, people know when they have a chance to apply for our job. Same idea, except instead of everybody voting, it's the 5 of us. I think that's a more democratic process.
Okay. Just to be clear, Mary, you do keep any applications that come in on file. Is that right?
And if that person was interviewed, if that person was interviewed, we still keep it on file, like if, in the past, like Mrs. Weymouth was saying, that we would interview those candidates along with the reappointed candidates. We would keep those applications on file, and on some occasion, I know that one of the council members said, "Oh, we now have an opening," and I remember, I think it was Mrs. Weymouth that said, "We have an opening," and I remember there is a candidate, and I think I pulled it when I went back to work the next morning, so, yeah.
Okay. All right, so
If you want to make a motion.
Sure, I'll make a motion and not get seconded. But, yeah, I move
Just get it on the
that
record.
we open a vacancy 2 months prior to an expiring term to give us 1 month to see if there are applicants, and then another month to reappoint if there are none.
Okay, a motion's been made. Is there a second? Seeing no motion, no second, the motion fails. Then the next item, I guess we don't need to do anything because we don't feel the need to re-interview these folks. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on the consent agenda. This is this contains items that we consider routine, and so they'll be enacted by one motion. There won't be any separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, and the request is for good cause, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Does anyone have anything that they would like to remove from the consent agenda for separate discussion?
I'd like to remove item 6, approve reappointments to boards and commissions.
Anything else?
That's it.
Anyone else? Anyone from the public want to discuss any item separately? Okay, seeing none, do I hear a motion to accept the consent agenda items 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And do I understand, Councilor Breyer, that this is for the reasons that you said before? Do you want to make a motion, or?
Yeah, no, I don't have a motion to make.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the reappointments to boards and commissions as set forth in item 6?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion carries 4-1 with no abstentions. Next item on our agenda is the Bristol County Water Authority monthly report.
Good evening. Tom Craig, one of Barrington's representatives. I'm covering for Alan Klepper, who could not make it tonight. And you received the report from Alan, which has all the details of our meeting 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. I'm not going to attempt to recite all of that again, assuming you've read it. The one thing I'll just note is that we are all relieved that the pipeline repair has been completed. That was a big deal, very big. And we're pleased at how it worked out. It was sort of touch and go at the beginning, where everything seemed to go wrong in terms of, instead of the break being at the Port of Providence or the like, where it's easy to fix, it ended up being in the middle of the river. But we're satisfied that it did work well, and the contractor did a very good job. And the focus, as you can see, is now on a connection with Pawtucket, which is much clearer in our eyes now than it was before, in view of the impact of this and the knowledge that East Providence's water line is decades older than ours, which says they too have a serious concern if they can come up with the money to join in with us, and hopefully from the state getting funding, which is a long-term project, a very long-term project, but an important one. If there are any questions with respect to what we've been doing, happy to answer them.
Quick question. Do you
Yes.
know anything about the estimated water bills that are going out to people who haven't had meter changes?
not in detail.
Okay.
That's one of the things. Actually, I have a meeting this week on our policy with respect to what do we do with those who haven't had the meters changed yet. And I don't know what is going to be recommended, but it is obviously once 95% or whatever it is currently are on the new meters, it becomes very expensive to attempt to deal with the remaining ones, and that's the problem we're faced with. But I do not know how that's going to work out.
Okay, great.
That was going to be my question. How are you going to deal with the households that are refusing to?
I mean, ultimately, if someone does not have a bill, they face the prospect of being cut off. When and how that happens, I don't know. And that has not been decided. But where there is, that's the normal recourse if someone fails to pay their bill, and if you're not getting a statement because there's no meter reading, then, but again, I do not know. I'm winging it on that one, so to speak.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on interviews and appointments, and the sole one on for tonight is the Economic Development Commission. There are 2 vacancies for 2 full members, and is Dr. Frank Capizzo here?
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming in tonight. Appreciate your coming in, and maybe you can tell us a little about yourself and why you're interested in the Economic Development Commission.
Well, I first came to town in 1980 and decided to set up my medical practice in Barrington, and subsequently have moved my residency to Barrington as well in 1982. I practiced in town for over 35 years in general medicine and cardiology, and I've enjoyed my stay here. And I decided that I'm retired now and I have some time on my hands, and got interested more into what I could do and contribute to this town. That's the main reason.
Great. Any questions for Dr. Capizzo? Did I say your name correctly? Is it Dr.
Capizzo.
Capizzo?
Have you attended a meeting of the Economic Development?
No, I have not.
Okay. When is that? When do they meet?
Fourth Thursday?
Yeah, I can't recall. We did have one. It's towards the end of the month.
Okay.
I think it's the fourth Thursday.
Is it the fourth Thursday? You said the fourth?
Fourth Thursday.
Fourth Thursday. And your perspective as both a resident and as a former business owner in town, it would be very valuable.
Well, I found it difficult when I first moved here to get my practice going. And as a small business owner, it gets more and more difficult to establish oneself in any town, whether it's Barrington or wherever. And I feel that it's important to have the small business owners in town, both the new ones that we'd like to attract as well as the existing ones, because it's a lot easier to retain the existing business in town and expand that if at all possible. And I'm hoping to attract new ones, help any existing businesses that have been in town to remain in town and hopefully expand. And hopefully my experience will help them do that.
That's great.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you for having me.
Do I hear a motion to appoint Dr. Frank Capizzo to the Economic Development Commission? I don't have the motion language in front of me. As a full member to fill an unexpired term with the date of April 30, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is public comment. This is an agenda item for members of the public to speak regarding a topic that's not already on the agenda. If you would like to speak, please indicate that you would, and by raising your hand. When you're recognized, please approach the microphone and state your name and address for the record. And please sign in at the podium. Would anyone from the public like to be heard? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. This is a present, discuss, and act on trash and recycling. This is from Kim Jacobs, our Chief Resilience Officer, and BHS intern Alex Kazi. I'm not sure I'm saying that name correctly.
Good evening, council members. My name is Alex Casey. I am a 16-year-old junior at Barrington High School, and for the record, my address is 45 Prospect Street. Over this past summer and fall, I interned with the Barrington Department of Public Works under the supervision of Barrington Resiliency Planner Kim Jacobs and DPW Director Alan Corvey. I was given the task of improving Barrington's educational outreach on recycling. After research and communication with members from the Rhode Island Resource Recovery Center and Barrington DPW Senior Administrator Gail DePiro, I learned the ins and outs of recycling. And what I found is surprising in some ways. I found that recycling loads can be rejected by even minor infractions and can cost the town upwards of $800 per rejected load. For example, just a few plastic bags or wetness in the recycling loads can cause the whole load to be rejected. When a load gets rejected, it is sent to the central landfill, which is filling up fast. The central landfill, which is located in Johnston, buries about 3,800 tons of trash from Rhode Island daily. At current loading rates, the central landfill will reach capacity before the year 2034. When the landfill closes, the state will either find another city or town to build a new landfill, which no city or town is currently jumping at. The state will either attempt to expand the current facility. This is very expensive, and it would require land acquisitions and wetland relocations. 3, ship the materials out of state, which is very, very expensive. Or 4, incinerate the materials, but that's currently prohibited under Rhode Island law. The Rhode Island Resource Recovery Center has asked Rhode Islanders to reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot or compost the materials as much as they can in order to extend the life of the central landfill for the next generation. From the time span of September 2018 to June 2019, 10 months, the town of Barrington had 8 rejected loads, weighing 77.37 tons and costing $6,047. This money comes out of the general funds for the town as part of the refuse bill. This money could be better used in other areas of the town. It's Rhode Island. Our roads aren't great. In July of this year, I met with Mr. Josh Bickford from the Barrington Times. We worked together to write an article about the importance of recycling only the allowed materials in the ways that are most effective. We found that many people are uninformed and made simple mistakes, like leaving their recycling bins outside when it rains or putting items inside of plastic bags. Since plastic bags are not recyclable through curbside pickup, the inclusion of these bags can cause an entire load to be rejected. The article outlined the best practices for recycling in Barrington. From the date of the article's publication in mid-July 2019 to today, which is about 5 months, the town of Barrington had 3 rejected loads, totaling $2,829. This is, on average, less than the preceding time frame, showing a small but inadequate decrease. However, there is still a need for additional recycling education. Recycling is the best way to slow down the production of waste materials. Recycling is very simple if the community understands what is and what isn't allowable in your recycling bin. In an attempt to help the local community understand the simplest process of correct recycling, I created an informational flyer specifically for Barrington which outlined what can and cannot be recycled. Mr. Corvey and I are currently discussing an effective distribution method for the information. Altogether, the primary goal of my internship was to educate the community and to remind them that even one small, unintentional mistake can impact a whole load for the town. It's better to throw your materials away if you're unsure, rather than compromise an entire recycling load. It's my hope that we'll be in a position to send the informational flyer created to everyone in the town. I think the flyer will have a positive impact on increasing recycling efforts, as well as decreasing the number of rejected loads. My final comments to the council and those in attendance is to please keep your recycling bins covered in the rain. And if you're unsure about what can be recycled, please consider doing a little research or not recycling the item, as it may jeopardize the entire load. Thank you, council, for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Casey. This is something that we do talk about a lot, and it's an important item, both in terms of the environmental impact of our community, but also in terms of the cost. We get a report each month showing how much we have made by selling our recycling. It's really not very much. The bigger item is the cost avoidance. Because we don't have to put that into the landfill, we don't pay the tipping fees, which, as Mr. Casey said, could be $800 a load. So we save money there, and then we combine that with the money that we've made. We do have very good compliance generally by the town in terms of participation, but it's always good to remind people what they should not be doing, because little mistakes can cost the whole load. And one of the interesting things that I found, I've learned in this, is the reason that we have smaller bins is to allow those who are doing the recycling to pull a bag, a shopping bag, out, and they may just throw it on the lawn, because if that shopping bag makes it in, the load could get rejected. So they actually do kind of a very quick filter. If it's a big barrel, they're not going to see the shopping bag in the bottom. So doing it that way rather than having a machine do it allows our contractors to help us with those loads. But thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you. I'm always amazed at how many people don't understand what can and cannot be put in the bins. It would be also, I think, helpful to bring attention to our recycling center, which takes many more items that can't be put into bins, including the plastic bags. I always actually bring my plastic bags back to Barrington's recycling center because I know that those bags will end up being recycled. I'm not sure that I have faith that the stores are complying with state law to recycle the bags that are left in front of stores. So it would be, I'd love to see another effort made to bring attention to our recycling center, because it really is, you can bring so many more items than you can put in recycling bins. But this is a great effort to get more people to recycle correctly. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to be heard? Okay, moving on to the next item. This is to discuss and act on resolutions. The first is supporting legislation authorizing a denial of a license or permit issuance or renewal based on unpaid taxes or assessments. This was continued from November 4th. We do have a draft resolution that sets forth the language, the proposed language for the statute. I have a suggestion for that, but if anyone else wants to be heard, I'm happy to wait on that. My one suggestion is as to item D, which is the last. It currently reads, the licensing or permitting authority has discretion to issue a license or permit notwithstanding the foregoing if the applicant has entered into an approved repayment plan for the tax arrearage and is current on making payments pursuant to that plan. And I would suggest that just after the words "to that plan" we add "or for other or on other grounds that the licensing or permitting authority deems meritorious." that just gives us the flexibility. I can't think of a situation right now, but there may be a situation where we want to make sure this happens even if there is no plan in place at that time. Maybe it's a time constraint or something like that. But that would give us the discretion but not the obligation to issue or renew a permit or license.
Is the council the licensing or permitting authority in all such cases, or does it change?
We are the licensing and permit. Mike, we're the licensing for all things, right?
Yes. Okay. All right.
Any other suggestions? So, Mary, the language that I'm suggesting is, or for such other reasons as the licensing or permitting authority deems meritorious. With that change, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution to request the enabling legislation to Chapter 44-7, collection of taxes generally, allowing the town of Barrington to deny the renewal licenses and permits to applicants in arrears on local taxes, liens, and assessments.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Next item on our agenda is a resolution honoring Charlotte Sornberger. This is one of those extraordinary volunteers that we have who has done so much for Barrington. And we will, she's not here tonight, but we will be honoring her tomorrow night.
Where is that and when?
It's at the library auditorium at 6:30.
Do I hear a motion to adopt the resolution honoring Charlotte Sornberger for her many years of service to the town of Barrington and conservation efforts throughout the state of Rhode Island?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh,
We forgot.
sure.
Next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on authorization to submit grant applications regarding Walker Farm. We'll have Phil Hervey.
Yes, I would like to introduce Regional Planning Director Arnold Robinson with Fussin O'Neill. He's with Fussin O'Neill is an on-call engineering firm for the town. They've been working with the town, my department, including Kim Jacobs, who will also be part of this presentation. She's the town's consulting resiliency planner. So this project is going, we're looking for grant funding from the Municipal Resiliency Program available through the Infrastructure Bank and also the DEM Recreation Development Grant Program for these improvements that they will be walking you through. And included in the MRP grant are two other additional sites that were identified as excellent opportunities for resiliency funding. Based on, we expect to be able to get up to $200,000 through that program, so it fits within that cap, the rough kind of a soft cap, that cap. So they'll be walking you through these projects, and we're looking for endorsement from the council for the submittal of the MRP grant and approval of the submittal of the recreation grant, which requires allowing public input. That grant program requires the council basically to look for or allow for public input on that grant application. So I'd like to turn it over to Arnold.
Great, thank you. For the record, Arnold Robinson. While we do have an on-call contract with the town, I reside at 34 Hawthorne Avenue. I will fully confess that while we're doing this work as consultants with the town, I absolutely love Walker Farm. I've kayaked there for 20 years, and the idea of getting to work on it as part of the resiliency efforts and recreation efforts was sort of near and dear to my heart. We're going to take about 8 minutes to walk you through what we've been working on for about 2 months to give you a sense of the project. I know in your briefing packet you had some information. I would say to folks in the audience, if you do want to see the presentation and you're on that side of the room, is to shift over so you can everyone has a chance to see it. So really the project has 2 main goals. You've just finished your CRB workshop. You're looking to make places in town more resilient to climate change impact. Walker Farm has been at the top of a lot of your planning documents for that. It certainly was there in the CRB workshop. But at the same time, it's a major recreation node for the town. It's where folks use the boat ramp. It's where folks bring human-powered craft, walk their dogs. And so there's a lot of use on that site. So how do you balance that? How does that work forward? One thing that is useful as a bit of a refresher is how many things take place at Walker's Farm. 38 acres are passive, they're wetland, they're forest, they're conserved land, but in the center of that you've got the town leaf composting facility. You've got the public gardens that are out there, the garden plots. And really everything is clustered at this southeast site where the boat launch is, where that open space is. That's where a lot of that human activity is taking place. There's connections to Osamoquin for dog walking, and of course there's a whole road system. Now your planning framework has not ignored this. This shows up in almost all your major town plans, but at this point all of the plans basically say, do a plan for Walker Farm. Some of them go a little further. Your hazard mitigation plan called for some ecological restoration, but by and large it hasn't gone past that. We did look at all those pieces as we gathered and as we started to think about this. I do want to note as well, as a plan came together, we met with your Conservation Commission, we met with your Energy and Resilience Committee, we met with Recreation, and so we really tried to go around to get input from different town boards. So existing conditions. Like I said, the focus of the area is up at the southeastern section where to orient you, you've got the boat ramp and the dock going out, and then you've got progressing north, sort of those big open fields which DPW mows, and then at that extreme left side, the entrance to the leaf compost facility. One of the things is safety. You have a lot of vehicular movement going on, that turning circle for launching, the DPW trucks and the contractors who bring in the yard waste coming in, and then movements of boats. At the same time, you've got people who park or who walk to the site who are moving to the water, launching vessels. East Bay Rowing is bringing their boats over to their beach, and we've got some conflicts that take place. One of the most important conflicts is that really all of the access to the water tries to go through about a 20-foot wide slot. Everything goes to that one place. So if you take a look at it and you're sitting on the beach at a low tide, that's that left image, everybody's sort of coming down with their kayaks, with their rowing shells, with their boats, and going to that low beach. On the right-hand side, that's it at high tide. There's no beach. You're essentially going right off that step into about 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water. So having said that, the other thing that's going on site is what we call subsidence. This was all filled land. This was created by dumping organic materials. And so what's happening in that area of blue is this. When we get rainstorms or we get an extreme high tide, we get a great seasonal pond. And actually, if you look at that, there are ducks in the middle of that pond. And on the roadway side to the left, that's your access road to one of your major DPW facilities. It is slowly getting more and more inundated and sinking more and more. Now, subsidence is not a bad thing. It's a naturally occurring thing. And in your hazard mitigation plan, done with Save the Bay, one of the things it calls for is to allow that to become a salt marsh again, to allow nature to take its course. The interesting thing is, to the north, you have ground that is about 3.5 feet higher that is almost completely unused. So you've got this fantastic zone that's up there that really doesn't have easy access to the water. The final existing condition note that's very important is your shoreline condition. If you've ever walked this or walked behind it, about 30% of the material is concrete. That is not a good material to have in a shoreline where you want to encourage natural sediment collection, where you want to have native species come in. All of it is dumped concrete foundation, old curbstones, those kind of things. Also makes it very hard to navigate over if you're trying to make it to the water. So when we thought about a plan for this, and really Phil and Kim and I got together and started thinking after the CRB workshop, could you do 4 things at once on this site? Could you improve things for all of the users who are out there? So what we want to do is improve and balance the diverse set of uses on a site that we know is ecologically sensitive. We want to prepare for the impacts of climate change, especially sea level rise, which we know will inundate the site more and more as time goes by. So we'll take you through what those highlights are. So allow your sort of brain to key in on this plan. Blue is habitat restoration, green is resilience, and brown is recreation facilities. And I'm going to highlight those as we go through. So one of the easiest things to do, and those are those circled zones in orange, is to create an appropriate estuarine buffer zone on that place. Right now it's created with this sort of slope that drops radically off to the water, which isn't what you want, made of man-made materials. What we propose as part of this project, and we did this with Save the Bay and the great Winley Ferguson, we worked with her on design for this, is to regrade that shoreline, take out the man-made materials, go back to a natural slope and natural materials on that north side, and on that south side, where the pitch is lower, allow that salt marsh to migrate in. Take those materials out and allow it to come into the green zone. That's what it looks like in other places where things have been repitched and the native materials reused to create that edge on the right-hand side. And you've done this in a beach environment at Town Beach already. This is that same kind of removal of man-made materials and putting in native species to allow that to become more resilient. In terms of allowing flood storage capacity and allowing this to go back to nature, that area, the big green area, is one of your main opportunities to allow salt marsh to sort of re-come back in. But at the same time, you've got to raise your access road about 8 inches and create a riprap edge that will hold that as long as you can. That DPW site's not going anywhere. People are still going to try to launch boats and walk dogs. You want to make that safe. On the left-hand side, that gets the buffer zone, and we preserve all of that marsh grass that's out there. And floodable parks, the kind of thing we're looking at here, happen all over the place in England and other parts of the U.S. Interestingly, we don't have any great floodable parks in Rhode Island yet. This could be one of the first places that really has that. Finally is recreation. A big discussion when we met with your Energy and Resilience Committee was, well, over time, isn't this just going to flood anyway? You've got a long period of time, decades, where this site is going to be usable. So people are not going to leave it alone, and you want to provide a safe environment for recreation. So a couple of things are going on. The big move is separate the motor vehicle vessels from the human-powered vessels. Create a separation zone so that people aren't walking across that boat ramp where trucks are backing up. So we retain the boat ramp. We actually improve the platform that's out there, which is right now is raw concrete that's sort of settling, and build a fantastic sort of viewing platform that's ADA accessible with railings, so it's safe. We put a couple of parking spaces right in the high point of that zone so people can use that successfully. We also create a pullover lane for truck trailer for when people bring their boats in. Right now, if you go there on a Saturday and people are parking on both sides, it's almost impossible to drive in and out. It's very unsafe. To the north side, we create what we call the human-powered watercraft zone. So what you've got there is parking that is actually pull-off, and kayak users tell me that if you do that, you can actually back in and you can slide the kayak right off the back of the car and not have to pull it out into traffic. That is all permeable paving. None of this is built in place. None of this is asphalt. This is all the same kind of basically permeable gravel that we'd have on site so that water percolates through the site. We move the kayak storage over there. East Bay Rowing moves to higher ground for its seasonal boat storage. And we create, most importantly, a stepped area in the zone where there is no marsh grass right now so that you can step down at any tide and launch kayaks and canoes. And then there's a floating gangplank that goes out to a small floating platform, 8 by 10, where you'd have the first ADA accessible kayak and canoe launch in the East Bay. East Greenwich just put one in this year. Their traffic is off the charts for people using it. They're having groups coming in to use it. And that also allows an opportunity to have a low-profile dock where you can launch kayaks and rowing shells. Right now, East Bay Rowing wades in at the beaches where the rocks are. This provides an opportunity to have the launch take place over there. So what we've tried to do really with this project is sort of overall, there's some good imagery. There's that stepped canoe launch area on the right. There's one of those ADA accessible kayak launches. Those are seasonal, by the way. Those get pulled at the end of the season. November 1, those all come out. Those go into storage. And there's a low-profile floating dock that's similar to what URI has down on Little River. This is that's the existing platform, which is sort of a viewing platform on the left side. That's what we'd be looking for on the right, where birders, people who are observing, could watch it, could look out over the river and see activities, and it could be fully accessible and near parking. So that's Walker Farm in a nutshell. Happy to take questions at the end. One thing that this project does, though, it allows us to address 2 other areas with your resiliency funding that are also in your hazard mitigation plan, treatment of road ends. So I'm going to let Kim describe that.
All right. Hi, good evening. Kim Jacobs, Barrington Resiliency Planner. And as Phil and Arnold mentioned, since we hadn't reached the MRP funding cap, we decided to couple the resiliency projects or the resiliency improvements at Walker Farm with 2 other sites. The 2 sites are the shoreline access rights-of-way off of Bowdoin Avenue and Opeechee Drive. Right, and so those are the 2 sites there that the arrows are pointing to. And basically, the type of work at these sites is compatible with that of Walker Farm. We're looking to improve shoreline access and prepare the sites for the impact of climate change. These sites, the focus is on flooding, storm surge, and sea level rise. Specific objectives include restoring functional ecological features, including shoreline reconfiguration, improving access for human-powered watercraft, and reducing stormwater runoff into the Barrington River, improving water quality. So overall, we're showing you a breakdown of actually 3 different grants. The first grant is the DEM Recreation Grant for Walker Farm. It has a total cost of $288,431. The grant would be 80% of that, or $230,745, and the match is 20%. The MRP grant is comprised of two different sections on there, which is actually 3 projects: the Walker Farm and then the Opeechee and Bowdoin right-of-ways. If you combine those 2 columns, the total cost for the project is $268,669, with a grant of $201,502 and a matching of 25%. The last line we have on there, we haven't really talked about. That's a habitat restoration fund. We are going to pursue that for some of the work to the northern part of Walker Farm. And that would be approximately a $30,000 total cost, with most of it coming from the grant. So if you have any questions on either specifics at the site or the cost estimate, we're glad to try to answer them for you.
So first, I think it's fantastic. I think that would be an excellent upgrade to Walker Farm. One thing, just in looking at the pictures and seeing the amount of increased activity that would be there, something on the cost estimate side, but not specific to the project, what sort of labor is needed after it's up and running to maintain it, to make sure that it remains safe and in good repair? How much does this add to the DPW staff load?
And I absolutely love this question. That should be a question I think should always be asked. I'm a civil engineer, and I look at the burden of DPW always. So I love that question. Hopefully the work we're doing will actually decrease the amount of work for the DPW down there.
That's a great answer.
sure. The team agrees. Yes, that is definitely something we're looking at these projects, that we recognize that DPW certainly carries a tremendous load in this town, and taking a little bit away from what they have to do is always a good thing.
I had a question about one of the rights of way on Bowdoin. There's one of them there that seems to be occasionally blocked by, I take it, a neighbor's car. Are we going to get comfortable as a legal matter? I think the Harbor Commission already did, that that is a right of way that we're not going to end up fighting about before we put the money in.
I'm not sure which right-of-way you're looking at. Mm-hmm. I know the DPW just put some markers, mm-hmm. some shoreline access markers. This is the first one off of Bowdoin. It's, I think it's at like the intersection of Woodward and Bowdoin.
And I think that's one where somebody seems to park in it quite frequently. I know there's an obelisk there, but I just worry that, you know, if we make big improvements, I don't know if they're just doing it to be obnoxious or if they really think they have a legal claim to it.
Okay. One aspect that would occur through those projects is the sites, the right-of-ways would be surveyed, mm-hmm. so that would be marked off. Perfect. And then the DPW could decide if we needed any kind of thing other than just the monument there to block that from people parking.
Great.
Yeah.
This is a right-of-way that actually had a gated chain across it from one of the neighbors that we removed last year, which has now opened it up for parking. So it's going to be a continuing.
I had a question about the Walker Farm project, and it looked like part of the resiliency work went, it's hard to tell with the circle, it certainly went right up to the road, and I understand the road bed would come up 8 inches. Are there culverts underneath to allow for further expansion of that?
Yeah, the flow on the site does not move east-west. So we actually talked about that as part of the project with Wenley Ferguson from Save the Bay, about sort of how do we maximize flow back to the wetlands that are back across to the west side of the site. And the way to do that is actually to increase the culvert that's under the access road right now. That's where that flow comes in through that tidal gate, the small pond, under the culvert, under the road, and then flows north. The flow that's coming from the north itself is doing quite well after that 2005 restoration. That's the place where you want to get it. Getting an east-west movement is going to be very difficult to do. And so that, she was sort of like, that's really not going to get you the movement that you want out of it. I think we will see later planning for Walker Farm phases down the road where we might be rethinking what's the best access road into this site. Is it the one that's closer to the DPW facility? Wenley, when they opened that up, said that's got the higher ground. If we can still keep flow going, that may be the more natural place to have it and allow that southern end to open up. So I think what we're talking about really is sort of we're at the first phase of a project thinking about Walker Farm's long-term usage, which is going to change as you estimate how long the site will be viable for with increased storm events. So in the short answer, no, east-west really isn't a way to move water, but increasing the flow from the south part into the north is a great thing to build into a future phase. Okay. Does that answer the question?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was actually a topic that came up in their presentation to conservation, because there is an existing but blocked former access road to Walker Farm, but we don't have the money right now to be able to open that up.
I just have a quick question. What's the timing of this whole project?
Well, the MRP funding, the kickoff will be in January, and we are required to use the funds by December 2021.
So we have those funds already?
No, we're applying Friday, and we will know somewhere around December 18th. It's a very short turnaround for that grant. So, but then the kickoff meeting, should we get the funds, it would start in January. We hope to finish the project by summer of 2021, but we do have until December 2021 to use the funding.
And the Walker Farm funds?
That's the resiliency of the Walker Farm. The DEM grant is, we'll find out in February, March, if we get the funding, and then, we work on that same time frame. We try to do the project concurrently.
So we should know by the end of February whether we've gotten the money for these projects?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
That's great.
Can they be done in the pieces if we get the funding for some and not others? Each can go forward individually?
They can. We specifically designed it that way. It's our hope that we get everything. But yes, we designed it that way.
I should say that although we talked about this taking 2 months of work, it's really about 6 months of work in 2 months' time. So, our team has been working really hard on this. In order to take advantage of some of these grants, they kind of fly at you, and we really wanted to do that. As soon as she was appointed, our resilience officer started working on it. So, great work on that. Thank you. Thank you all.
Shall I make a motion? I'll make a motion to authorize the submission of the Municipal Resilience Program, or MRP, grant for work associated with the Walker Farm Recreation and Resilience Improvements Project.
Second?
Made and seconded.
Can I jump in real quick? It actually requires public input, like opportunity for public input on the recreation grant.
Okay. Would anyone from the public like to be heard on this recreational grant? Please come forward.
I'm Nancy Gregg O'Brien from 9 Vermont. I'm a certified kayak leader for the Appalachian Mountain Club Narragansett chapter. I have led numerous paddles out of Walker Farm. I know how dangerous it has been at times with trucks going through the parking and for people trying to load and unload boats over the rocks while other people are trying to do power boats. And I just think this is a fantastic plan, and I hope it goes through. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hi, Scott Whitney, live at One Prospect, and I'm actually one of the instructors at the site, and I'm pleased we're talking about moving people to safer waters. If you've ever been over there, you realize the tides really pick up speed fast, and it's problematic for newbies that are out there that sometimes get too close to the bridge, so that's fantastic. When I think about, though, the potential increase of the appeal and use of the site, what we've talked about with another road, I think we ought to really take a look at that, because actually one of the most unsafe parts of that site now is the access in and out of the road. If we increase the popularity of it, and if we know we have another option now, why don't we take a look at that if there's a way to wrap it into this project? If the town knows we have something that's a little bit better and safer, that's a higher level access, let's look at it sooner than later. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh. Any opposed? The motion carries, no abstentions. The next one is...
I'll make a motion to authorize the submission of a grant to the Department of Environmental Management, DEM, recreation grant for work associated with Walker Farm Recreation and Resilience Improvements Project.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I don't think we need public comment, but I'm certainly open to it if anyone would like to be heard on this. Okay, seeing none. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. And we have our next item on our agenda is for a shade structure, right?
Yep.
This is the second grant application to be submitted to DEM. This would be considered a small grant project. The Parks and Recreation Commission considered multiple options. They recommended Walker Farm and for the large grant, and Lincoln Avenue tennis court facility shade structure as a small grant application. I've provided some materials, including an image of what it would look like. It would be placed over that concrete pad where the bleachers are in the center area, providing spectators and people waiting, or parents or whatever, an ability to get out of the sun. Also campers in summer. We have a 6-week summer camp, tennis camp. It's an important time to be able to provide shade. So the estimate of the structure itself delivered is, what is it? $23,226. We're still working on the labor piece of it, because you have to put it together, otherwise it's just a pile of stuff. And we're working on that number, and a safe bet is to say, I made it up to 60, but I'm hoping it'll be less than that total. You never know with labor costs with the prevailing wage, but we're working on getting a good quote to kind of fine-tune that number before we submit. But if the motion could include up to $60,000 to be amended once we have a better number on the labor piece of it, we'll make that hopefully a lesser amount than $60,000. But that would be the goal for this motion. It also requires public input, as the previous project, the opportunity for public input.
Is there any concern, because it's on school property, receiving a DEM grant for something that's on school property? Because I know in another committee we've talked about that potentially.
Is there a school nearby? This is the town-owned Lincoln Avenue tennis court facility.
Okay.
That's what it is. And we got grant money for the actual resurfacing of these of the tennis courts before. It's important to note that it's available to everybody. It's not controlled by the school department. They have access to it, obviously, for tennis teams and stuff in class, but it's available to anybody in Barrington or outside Barrington. So it's not considered a school facility.
Okay.
You're right, though. That would hurt if it were on the school itself. That does hurt the application.
And I have a question on that, and I'm sorry it's a little unrelated to this particular grant. How do we do that, right? I know we did that with the old middle school fields, and apparently at this facility as well. How is that formalized? Because it's come up in other discussions, and it's kind of an open question. How do we do that? How do we say that what everyone thinks of as the high school tennis courts are actually not controlled by a school department, but are property of the town?
Basically, you have to demonstrate you have ability to program activities there, and people have access to it. Generally have access to it, even though after school hours. It's not something that's like a football field where people get kicked off. You have really restrictive use of like Victory Field. But in this case, we have the ability to program, and we also have our own fee schedule for lessons there. If there's an instructor doing tennis lessons, so we have the ability to program this space. So I think that does help. It doesn't disqualify it to be at a school, but it doesn't help. It hurts. It hurts the application to be a school-controlled facility.
And in terms of what's required to satisfy DEM in that regard, do we give them something? Is there a form, or do they look it up on the website to make sure the public can use it? I mean, how do they go about that?
They might look up the tax property card,
something
like that. They would have access to that. We have to mention the fact that you're going to park across the street. There's no on-street parking, so that's going to be something. That parking is available to the public across the street. I think that's a good thing. But the facility itself is a town facility.
Okay.
Across the street being the high school. Can't get around that. But I think it's got potential.
Good.
I'm generally bad at estimating the cost of things, But for what this is, it just seems pretty expensive. I know that there was already looked like a quote in place that the athletic director had, but were other options priced out?
He's working on that, but that was the preferred structure. But that's just the materials, and so like I said, the mystery is the labor, and that's prevailing wage. So depends. I mean, it drives up, like, for example, the bus shelter. Remember that discussion a number of years ago?
Yes.
We did a lot of that in-house, but it still is a substantial cost at that.
Maybe Bob Speaker could put this
Bob
together.
Speaker, if we get Bob back, that might be actually a good idea. So, yeah, I wish I had a better number on the labor. I'm still working on that.
I'll make a motion to authorize submitting a RIDEM outdoor recreation grant, small grant, for a shade structure at the Lincoln Avenue Tennis Court facility with a total project cost not to exceed $60,000, requiring a local match of up to $12,000.
Second.
Okay, made and seconded. Would anyone from the public like to be heard on this? Please, come forward. You can't put a kayak rack there, though.
No launching of kayaks there, but as an abutter to the middle school, they took out a tremendous number of trees in the process of constructing all of the construction for the fields, and I just wonder if putting in more trees might be not only more cost effective, provide the shade, and beautify the environment. There's a lot of trees were removed. They have replaced them with pine trees, but if they put in oaks or maples or tulip trees or whatever, that would also have provided shade.
You said the middle school. Are you in a butter to the middle school?
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is at the high school.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking Lincoln Avenue is also in middle school.
Right. But anyone
Your
else?
idea is well taken, though.
Yeah.
Plant more trees.
The carbon offset doesn't know which school it's at.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, there's been a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And no abstentions, the motion carries. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on bids, and our lone bid today is from the fire department. Chief Bissett.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This bid is to replace our attack fire hose. I bought new hose it'll be almost 14 years ago. We established a standard at that time for the care and use of the hose, and most fire hose that you use for attack line, this is the actual line that you would see dragged into a house or above on a roof or wherever it has to go. So it takes a beating, but most fire hose lasts about 10 years. We established a standard where we, after each use, it's inspected, cleaned, dried, even though it will not be harmed with water, obviously, but we take care of it, we inspect it. We have card records, it's all numbered hose so we can keep track of it. Well, recently we're starting to see some failure with some slight leaking, and that's showing us that there is degradation taking place. So it's prudent that we replace it. It's only a $14,000 issue, which I had planned on in our capital budget equipment account, so the money is there. So I'm recommending that we make that purchase through Shipman's Fire Equipment Company.
I know that with our turnout gear, I think we send that to fire departments in other parts of the world. When we've kind of established a sister fire department in upstate Maine, which I've given some equipment to in the past. You're hitting right on it. I'm thinking about whether or not you guys want to take a shot with some of this hose, as long as you keep your eye on it and make sure that you're not, getting too bad. But there are a lot of fire departments in
in northern New England especially, that could use something like this. This is pretty good hose. This isn't, this is our lifeline. So it's something we might look at depending on how long it takes us to get this in.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to award the bid for Angus High Combat Fire Hose Replacement to Shipman's Fire Equipment Company, Incorporated, 72 Cross Road, Waterford, Connecticut, 06385, in the amount of $14,880.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. No abstentions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on ordinances, and the first one is to introduce ordinances. For those of you in Troop 6, in order for us to pass a new law, we have to first introduce it at a meeting, and then at a later meeting, we would pass the law. We have to do it in that two-step process. So the introduction of it, we may or may not talk about it very much. And then later we have a public hearing where anyone can participate in talking about how our laws are made. But the first step is for us to introduce it, and we have a number we have to do today. First one is 2019-26, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 67-20, apiaries, that is bees.
Before I introduce this, I just want to give a little bit of background that it came to my attention from a very nervous constituent that, in fact, raising bees in the town of Barrington is illegal because bees, by state law, are considered livestock. And Barrington does not allow us to raise livestock. So I asked the solicitor to draft an appropriate ordinance, and when it came back to me, it seemed inordinately onerous, especially given the fact that there have to be 100 households across or more in Barrington that are raising bees. We've had hives on town property. So we sent it to the Conservation Commission, and about 10 beekeepers from Barrington, plus the head of the beekeeping, Rhode Island Beekeeping Society, and all sorts of experts, the DEM inspector of hives, attended our Conservation Commission meeting, and what is being introduced tonight is something that everyone agreed was appropriate and all that was necessary. So I would like to introduce 2019-26, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 67-20, apiaries, or bees, and to schedule a public hearing for Tuesday, January
I thought we were going to do it in
7th.
Okay, yes.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those.
I just have a quick point to make, and this has nothing to do specifically with this, but members of the audience have asked if they could have copies of the ordinances to just see them during the meeting, like we have the agenda set out there, if we could just have copies of the proposed ordinances. Sure. I'm just passing that for future meetings.
Yeah, well,
yeah, so otherwise I have no problem with bees.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next item is to introduce an ordinance amendment to Chapter 69, Athletic and Recreational Facilities, and 134, Parks and Recreation, banning tobacco products. Councilor Breyer, would you like to make this motion?
Sure. And I'll move to introduce ordinance 2019-27, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 69 Athletic and Recreational Facilities and 134 Park and Recreation, banning tobacco products, and schedule a public hearing for January 7th? 2020.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next one is 2019-29, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 69 Athletic and Recreational Facilities, unleashed dogs prohibited. This is an ordinance that would, I think, clarify, because I think it's already arguably prohibited, but it would clarify that unleashed dogs, you must have a leash on your dogs on public properties. And this is for introduction. We can tweak the language of this, but it would allow, there's no question, it would allow dog walking on all public land, well, I shouldn't say all, but on public lands. But it would require leashes, and the problem this is trying to address is dog waste on athletic fields for the most part.
We've had a number of issues on athletic fields throughout the town, both at the high school and at our recreational fields, where people are taking their dogs and letting them off leash, especially in the enclosed baseball. And when the dog's off leash, they're often defecating and leaving the waste on the field, which is a safety hazard for our athletes. We've also had another resident who lets his dogs run free during our practices at Barrington High School and has interfered with the practices and some of the players, which is another safety issue. So basically, we're not trying to prevent people from taking Fluffy to Sally's soccer game on Saturday mornings. They just need to be on a leash. But what we're trying to do is clarify that even the only place you can keep your dog off leash in Barrington is at the dog park, which it is designed for.
So I wanted to talk about this one. I think this is one of those rare cases where we shouldn't introduce the ordinance, and I'll explain why. First, anecdotally. So between my wife and I, we kind of did rough math back of the envelope. We've coached a total of, say, 15 seasons of athletics. Usually 12 to 16 games per season, depending on whether you make the playoffs. And for each game you play, you probably had 1 to 2 practices. So you total that all up, that is coaching a combination of 600 games and practices on athletic fields that are baseball diamonds, soccer fields all over town. Not once have either of us ever seen dog waste or had a problem with it. Now, that's not to say it doesn't happen, but if the answer is it happens less than 1 out of 600 times, I'm not sure it's something we need to legislate. Add to it that we have plenty of ordinances about dogs already. 67.2 says each owner shall keep his dog under restraint at all times. Failure to do so shall constitute a violation of this chapter. 67.11, dogs prohibited from certain places, with the exception of guide dogs, as defined in 67.1, but which, by the way, there's no exception for guide dogs in this proposed ordinance, shall not be allowed at the Doug Rayner Wildlife Refuge at Knockham Hill, and shall not be allowed on any town-operated beach from Memorial through Labor Day. So those are the 2 public lands in Barrington where we prohibit dogs. Canine waste removal has its own ordinance. Regrets to the council who had to deal with that. 67-18, it's a violation of the ordinance to leave the waste. It's actually a violation of the ordinance to appear in any public area or private property unless you own it, unless you have a means of collecting the dog waste. So it sounds to me like if we have people letting their dogs run around off-leash or leaving waste, we have 2 ordinances already on the books that deal with it. So then you look back at the ordinance that's before us and you say, well, what's left of it? If those things are already prohibited completely clearly, no question. It says, person having custody of the dog shall be responsible for ensuring that the dog does not disrupt any other person's use of the facility. Well, if you talk to people about dogs, you'll get two reactions usually. You'll have dog people who will tell you it is the best thing in the world to have a dog and nothing in the world could compare to it. And you will have people who will say, every dog I see bothers me. And why does your dog have to be out in public? Well, that person's use of a recreational facility is disrupted as soon as they see a dog they don't like, right? I mean, that's their attitude about it. You will have a complaint from any person, any park you go to with a dog, you will find someone who will complain about it. And this gives them an opening to say, you know, I was out enjoying the park the other day, and boy, did seeing that dog really bother me. And I don't want that person calling the police. Add to it, the ordinance says that town director of public works may designate certain facilities during certain designated times when no dogs are allowed at the facility, whether leashed or unleashed. So this ordinance does in fact take out of town council's hands what's permitted on public land, and it gives that discretion to the director of public works, who can do it as he sees fit. He could say, afternoons, no dogs are allowed on parks. And that would be within the discretion under the ordinance. The fact that our ordinances already dictate two particular places where there is a limitation or prohibition on dogs being present, I think means that in the past we've taken it pretty seriously. There are, I asked Mary, about 1,200 licensed dogs in town, which by any count makes dog walking the single most popular recreational activity in the town of Barrington. And to say that we're going to have recreational facilities where we prohibit the most popular recreational activity in the town of Barrington just seems to me to be a step too far. We're legislating something we don't need to legislate. If there are kids who are being chased down by a dog off leash at the high school, lucky for them, the police department is right around the corner and they have an ordinance that's being violated and they can just make the phone call. But to pass another ordinance that gives to a department director the authority to ban something that apparently town councils have in the past have been careful to make sure was permitted, I think we're going too far. So I would say that we shouldn't introduce this one. I know that that's a rare thing, but it's happened in the past, and I think this is one of those cases.
If I can address the last portion about the DPW director, that's specifically for newly seeded fields. We spend a lot of money seeding and slicing fields and closing them to athletic events, and the hope would be that we could close them to dog walkers as well while that seed's taking place. We've had fields torn up by dogs, playing fetch on the field on a newly seeded field. That's specifically why that was put in there. And the DPW director is obviously the person that knows when a field has been seeded and maintains those fields, and that's why it's there.
Can for newly seeded fields, or if there's, I don't know, excessive water or any other hazard, can we prohibited people from fields in the past, right? Closed. So if you have to have your dog on a leash and you can't be on the field, then your dog also can't be on the field.
Well, I would agree if the rules were being followed. The biggest problem we have, and the reason this was instituted, is a request from George Finn because of generally the high school. However, Parks and Recs will tell you that they've had similar issues with our fields as well. So I concur with Councilor Boyajian that there are things in place. I think what this does is it kind of brings it all together, and it may be a little duplicitous, but it certainly makes it clear about what the expectations are.
So, first of all, let me say that I know George Finn, and George Finn is a dog lover. He has a dog, so he's not opposed to dogs. And he obviously has more experience with athletic fields than any of us here. And he has seen it as a problem. His concern is not because he doesn't like dogs, he does. It's because he doesn't want some field hockey player or lacrosse player to step in a dog mess and blow out their knee. And, has that happened yet? I don't know, probably not. But could it happen? Yeah, it's not a problem based on the lack of existing ordinances, because obviously there are ordinances that prohibit it. The problem is compliance. And I think that, first of all, to have spent 15 minutes talking about dog waste at a town council meeting seems excessive. But this is a problem that we don't want. I mean, this is a few people who aren't following the rules. They're not picking up after their dog. I'm not really in favor of putting in ordinances that suggest penalties, but I'm not sure I'd be opposed to a penalty that required Judge Connor to send somebody out who violated this to pick up other poops in town as a penalty. This is a situation where we hope that people will comply with these laws, and if even this discussion draws more attention to it, you can make things safer for the kids who are playing on it, cleaner, and you can also just make it easier on everybody else who does comply with the rules and who does pick up after their own dog. Having said,
I think you hit the nail on the head there, that it's a compliance issue. And to agree with Steve, I don't think we should legislate a compliance issue.
anyone else?
I mean, I would love to see what other cities and towns do. Is there a clear explanation of responsibilities? I see some towns do the little bags, and they have a trash receptacle that, you know, they kind of own up to the fact that there's dogs are popular and they're all around. And maybe we just say, this is a fact of life. Make it easier for people to pick up after their pets and have a place to throw the waste. So I just would love to know if...
So an anecdote came up at the Parks and Rec meeting last month, and it was about what had happened in another town. And actually, the person telling the story thought this was a great thing. A travel team, a Barrington parent, brought the dog to the game, and I forget which town it was. Call it, East Greenwich, North Kingstown, somewhere over there. And they have an ordinance that bans dogs from athletic fields and recreational facilities. So someone they called a field marshal, which I thought sounded a little severe. The field marshal came over and said, you can't have that dog here. And they said, well, it's a travel team. We drove from Barrington. My daughter or son is playing in the game. They had to sit in the car with the dog for the game. And the story was, the moral of the story as it was told was, do you see how much other people care about their athletic facilities? And to me, I said, in my mind, if we're sending field marshals out to tell people to sit in the car because they brought a puppy, these ordinances exist. And if George Finn needs to have someone keep an eye on the school, from the police department. I know they set up speed traps there all the time. They can, look in the rear view out at the field or something like that. But it says something about our community, I think, when we start to say a few people's bad behavior and the fact that they're inconsiderate, and we're going to start banning things that thousands of people in town enjoy, and that's a problem.
I agree that it is a compliance issue. That's one of the subjects that had a lot of responses in my neighborhood listserv. And it was amazing to hear people say, yes, we understand that you're supposed to keep your dog close to you. And no, the dog is supposed to be on a leash. And there are dog owners that just will not comply with leashing your dog or picking up dog waste. I live on a corner. I know very well that there is somebody in my neighborhood. It may be a statement towards me, I don't know, but their dog is very well trained to go on my lawn at the crack of dawn. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, why not put signage up at the fields, reminding people to keep their dog on a leash and pick up after your dog? I think short of getting a field marshal. You know, we should rethink introducing this and maybe think about signage.
So I'm hearing that we're not going to hear a motion. Would anyone like to make that motion? Seeing none, the ordinance will not be introduced. Next ordinance for introduction is 2019-30, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 144, Public Use of Public Lands.
Just by way of brief introduction about this, originally my thought was I knew we had a land use table in our ordinances that defines the use of all our public lands. My intention was just to amend it to add Lot 3A and designate it for the time being as conservation land. That way it wouldn't be undone or put to any other use without a public hearing and everyone having notice of it and things of that nature. Jim and Phil, thankfully, took it upon themselves to make sure that the whole list was out of date, so you can see the changes in here. And they're self-explanatory. But with that, I'd make a motion to introduce ordinance 2019-29 and an ordinance amendment to 144, use of public land, Exhibit A, Town of Barrington Land Use Index, and Exhibit A1, Town of Barrington Conservation Areas Map, and to schedule a public hearing for January 7, 2020.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion?
That was 2019-30.
I'm sorry?
2019-30.
2019.
Yes.
Yes, okay. I see it's in the motion. Yep. Change that to 2019-30. Thanks.
Okay. Made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And no abstentions. The motion carries. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing, and I am opening the public hearing into 2019-17, amending the zoning map for agricultural rural to protect farmland. This was continued from September 9th, 2019.
Yes, I put together a PowerPoint to detail exactly what's in these amendments, so I'd like to walk through that. And if you have any questions, let me know. I believe you can amend any of this at the close of the public hearing, so just keep that in mind. So some background, the Zoning Update Committee was formed after the adoption of the 2015 Comprehensive Plan, and among the package of zoning amendments that they developed was the adoption of a creation of a new agricultural rural zone for specifically the George Street area to reflect the intent of the comprehensive plan to preserve the rural character and encourage more farming uses up in that area. The AR zone would just replace the Residence 40 Conservation Development Zone, which is the area where you have housing that's permitted. The planning board, those recommendations kind of sat dormant for a while. The planning board took them back up for consideration last year. It's already been a year, time flies. So now, and the package that's before you tonight in the ordinance is what was recommended by the planning board a year ago. As you said, the council continued the public hearing after opening it up in September to tonight. The comprehensive plan, this is hinging on two specific items in the comprehensive plan. One is the economic development element, including supporting the goal of supporting agriculture as a vital component of the local economy. Action B under this goal is to revise the zoning map to establish agricultural zoning districts where appropriate in areas with historic agricultural use, including George Street. Essentially, that's really the only section in town. And also the natural and cultural resources element, preserve the character of rural areas of Barrington. And Action A is to enact protections through zoning and other regulations to limit impacts of development on the rural character of the George Street area. The proposed zoning amendments include, like as I mentioned, replacing the R40 CD zone with the agricultural rural zone. The AR district's intent is specified section 185-210, which is to limit development in areas that lack adequate infrastructure and to encourage the protection and preservation of rural character, farmland, open space, natural land features, and also to reduce potential conflicts between farming and residential uses. Parcels to be rezoned, which is, this is what was advertised in the newspaper, are all of the R40 CD zone. The one exception is the property that the Cemetery Commission led the charge on acquiring. It's lot 37, it's plat 37, lot 61. It's that cemetery designated site. That would be zoned to open space passive, which is consistent with cemetery zoning in other parts of town. The one open question might be whether you want to do anything on Lot 3A at this time, because that could affect the appraisal that we've already done for that site in anticipation of applying for, if we go this route, USDA grant money. So that's kind of a question to kind of keep in mind. So the definition of this district is described in 185-6, which is consistent with what I've already described. One important aspect of this package of zoning amendments is that it would exempt properties in the AR zone from inclusionary zoning affordable housing requirements, which is at least 20% of proposed development would have to qualify as affordable, and you get a density bonus to achieve that.
Sorry, could you just go back to that one more time?
Sure. And that's also consistent with another section of the comprehensive plan in which it exempts or does not include in any calculation the George Street area for comprehensive permit housing production. It includes 0 acreage in that area. As we know, we've had issues with that, famously, and this kind of helps build a case in case something else came up in the future. So one of the biggest change is the minimum lot size. The minimum lot size would go from 40,000 square feet. It's a cluster kind of development, but basically the yield under the R40 CD would be based on 40,000 square foot lots. So if you have 120,000 square feet, that's essentially 3 house lots, but it would be clustered in that zone. So now it would be 120,000 square feet. Everything else stays exactly the same, all the dimensional requirements for if you have a house there and you're building the area within that lot, the setbacks are as they are today. So you can, if you have the right to expand, you have enough room on the side based on side yard setbacks, you still have that right to do that.
Right, that was one of the concerns of some of the folks in the area, that if they wanted to put an addition on or a deck on, would this change it in some way?
I confirmed that with Mike's office, and that was definitely that would not be the case. You have the same rights to expand if you can still meet the zoning setbacks, even if you have an undersized lot.
Right. And would that remain after a sale? So if it's sold, changes hands?
I don't think a sale has any impact. It would remain the same.
It runs with the land. It has nothing to do with the sale. Yeah.
It does reduce the potential, obviously, for future subdivision. It also includes a new section specifically regulating barn structures in the AR zone. There's no standard really in there now. It would establish, basically match the 35-foot maximum that's in place now for residential lots, but allow for a 3,000 square foot maximum floor area that can be increased. The structure can be increased height and area by a special use permit through the zoning board. There in the farming definition, a farm structure related to livestock would have to be set back 100 feet from the lot line. That's already in place in our existing zoning. Here are some examples of the. Actually, I'd like to skip that slide to go over the table, and I just highlighted the proposed changes from the existing zone to the new proposed zone. I didn't list we'd be here until midnight to list everything, so I just highlighted the areas that are changed or highlighted sections I think are important to note that if there is a no change. Farming, this would be the only zone in town where farming would be a permitted use. And a fruit or vegetable stand would be permitted, not special use. Commercial nursery or greenhouse would be the same. It requires special use permit. You can do that now in the R40 CD zone. The single-family detached dwelling is a permitted use and will remain a permitted use. Not permitted, these will go from special use to non-permitted. Not permitted would be a two-family dwelling, a conversion of a single-family to two-family, senior residential community, an accessory apartment that's detached. The accessory interior apartment would remain the same. It would be as a special use permit. Accessory living quarters or guest house, community residence, dormitory for permitted use, or professional home office would go from, well, the first two would be permitted to not permitted, and then dormitory and professional home office, which you might want to, I'm kind of wondering about that one, but that would go from special use to not permitted. Do you have any questions about any of these?
Yeah, the professional home office, I'm not sure how that would really, I mean, I'm picturing, I don't know, a lawyer or an accountant or an architect who just has set up a little office in their home and says, come on in, meet on this topic. I don't see how that really hurts the...
Right.
I have a definition. Let me read the definition of that in case.
Yeah.
It's an office or studio in a dwelling of a physician, surgeon, dentist, attorney, engineer, architect, auditor, accountant, or other professional person licensed by law or certified by a recognized professional society or agency and providing professional services, residing on the premises, having no more than 2 non-resident associates or employees, and not offering commodities for sale. That's the definition.
So, my view is that I mean, certainly special use permit allows the zoning board to evaluate that. I don't think we should
Absolutely not. Because it's up to 2 employees, is that what it is? Two non-related employees?
Hang on a second. Providing professional services, residing on the premises, having no more than 2 non-resident associates or employees, and not offering commodities for sale.
What about a studio? I mean, what if an artist wants to sell their...
Well, they wouldn't be able to employ somebody to work with them. You can obviously paint in your home, create your art in your home and then sell it. But this is if you're employing somebody who's also going to be working on site or having clients come.
Yeah, but you do have a client come sometimes. I think that should be allowable.
I agree.
Doesn't include artists and all that stuff.
Do we have something that talks about artist studios?
He mentioned studio.
Oh, was that in it?
Oh, sorry, let me go back to that.
Yes, it's like office or studio.
These are more professional. I don't know if artists would fall under that normally. Based on the description, it sounds like artists would not fall under that because you don't be accredited kind of profession.
But I mean...
Yeah, shouldn't be, yeah.
So I guess the issue is if it's not prohibited, then you certainly can have a studio. The question is, can you sell your art from there?
No, that you can't. I would say that's a commodity then, and the answer would be you can't have people coming to your home and buying it under that definition. But that definition is already in the ordinance, right?
Yes.
That's already an existing
So
definition.
that would have to be something you'd want to think about changing perhaps in the future, and maybe we get best practices from other ordinances and look at that. But I think for purposes of tonight, if you want to change from to a special use permit from prohibited, you can do that.
Yeah,
But if you want to broaden the definition, we ought to do that. Yeah, that's a substantive change.
Yeah.
But I would recommend that we keep that as a special use permit, the last line.
I agree.
I noted that, yeah.
I had a question about dormitory for permitted use. Could that be like a seasonal worker bunkhouse? I mean, do they, I don't know, Fort Town, do they put up their seasonal workers? No? Okay.
Do you want the definition of that one?
Oh, you have a definition. No, there was a definition.
I'm surprised it's already permitted.
Yeah.
Like, I'm already surprised it's a special use, but it's a building used, well, I see now. I see. All right. A building used as a group living quarters for a student body, resident faculty, or religious order as an accessory use for a college, university, boarding school, orphanage, convent, monastery, or other similar institutional use.
All right.
So it wouldn't fall in there.
I don't think we need one.
Yeah.
Cider house?
That's what it brings to mind, doesn't it? Yeah.
Do you have any more questions on that one?
Not on this one. Please, come forward. Yes.
Well, I raised my, Richard Brooks, 138 George Street. I raised my hand for the bees, but I didn't get recognized.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Former beekeeper. There are thousands of species of bees, and this just says bees. I assume it means honeybees?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this
Does it actually stipulate that?
You know,
It doesn't include killer bees.
I've got to interrupt. That we've passed that, and we're going to have a public hearing though, where that discussion can take
My
place.
suggestion is that you look on, I mean, you can certainly come in based on Councillor Hearn's suggestion, we'll have it. But it'll be online as well.
It just caught my eye, that's all.
And give us any suggested changes ahead of time. That would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Want to go back?
Back a slide.
Accessory apartment detached. What's the definition of that?
Phil, do you want to take this so you can look at it a little bigger?
I can see it fine. It's far away, I can't see it. Accessory apartment detached. That was, let's see.
It's a personal question, actually.
Oh boy. That's a long definition. This would be an attached version of this definition, or detached.
Oh, yeah, but it includes APAs.
A dwelling unit in the same ownership as and accessory to a principal single-family dwelling unit where the principal or accessory residence is owner-occupied and the apartment is either reserved for rental occupancy by individuals or a family whose annual income does not exceed the region's income limits for low moderate income housing as defined by the state, and the tenancy of the unit is monitored and there's a deed restriction.
So it's rental?
Yes.
It's rental.
Normally, yeah. Or a family member. If you don't want to charge rent.
And then the research going on George Street. I know there's a lot about the farmland and so forth, but what if this research turns out to be productive? Finding the old church.
The
the surveys that are going to be done, which is a metal detection survey and a ground penetrating radar survey, are going to be restricted to Lot 3A.
Right.
That's the only place they're going to do it.
Right.
If we find something there won't be anything a foundation to dig up or anything. You'll just see basically the metal and the shape of the foundation, and they will confirm that was the place. At that point, we'd have a discussion about how we would recognize that as the First Baptist Meeting House.
Okay.
And, what we would do with the rest of the lot. That's part of the further discussion.
Probably not preserved,
There may be someone that wants to preserve it as a specific area, but not necessarily the whole lot. But at the public forum, it was decided that they felt this research was important before we took the next step to decide what to do with the rest of the lot or the whole lot in general. And that survey was supposed to be done, and it's been delayed till I think next week, but as the ground freezes, it may end up going to spring.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Now the use category is open recreation uses, no public or private bathing beach. It's impossible anyway, but that would be not permitted. Public or commercial swimming pool, not permitted, where it was a special use. Swimming pool accessory to a dwelling is the same. It's a permitted use. A riding stable, I think I got that backward. Tell me I got that backward. It's not permitted. It's supposed to be, that P should be on the AR side. Should be.
Oh, so it was not permitted.
Yeah, I got that. I think that's a typo. Does somebody have the ordinance itself? Went to double check that and I missed that one.
Are you saying that they should have been reversed?
Yeah.
You're
Should be
permitting
permitted
it now.
It should be permitted. That's what.
Which?
With the horse farm.
Riding stable.
Oh, okay.
You have a horse farm.
That surprised me.
I'm almost certain that was
Isn't that what it
a
used
typo.
to be?
Yeah.
Right.
I think it still is.
Yeah, you have that right. So in AR, in the proposed ordinance, it's permitted. All right, we're talking about, AR, right.
And
So that's on page 5 of the ordinance in the packet.
Is it right? It's not permitted now. We'll go to permitted.
Well, it doesn't say what it was before. It only shows the insertion.
yeah.
Okay.
So, Mary, to be clear, this is use table section 185-8.
Oh, okay.
The proposed agricultural rural would permit a riding stable. I think it says that already in it, but just to make it clear.
We double checked. It does, yes. So it was not permitted. And that makes sense. That would be a bad edit.
Okay.
So it goes from non-permitted to permitted and then change in the zone. The next one was discussed by the planning board quite a bit, which was the idea that you have horse riding out there, that a day camp for children or youth might make sense as a special use, so that would be not permitted to permitted. I'm sorry, special use, become a special use.
Okay.
Changes in the public and semi-public use category. Religious building goes from special use to not permitted, which is contrary to the possible historic use of Lot 3A, apparently. Family daycare from permitted to not permitted. Daycare center, special use to not permitted. Cultural activity, not permitted to special use.
So would that be like if
Needs to
religious or cultural group wanted to go have events on the land, just not with the structure?
Can I double check that too?
Why would you not permit family daycare? If somebody wants to take in 5 children.
Why would you not?
It's a business.
Yeah, it is a business.
It has a lot of people coming and going. And
Usually family daycare don't have a whole lot of people. Daycare, yes, but
Family daycare is a pretty broad.
you probably get, depends on your license, how big of a facility and how many staff.
Right.
Okay, that's a typo as well. That should have been special use to non-permitted on cultural activity.
And so it's reversed. Okay. And what is considered a cultural activity?
Yeah.
Hang on, I'll look that up.
Are we still on the daycare center?
Well, we'll come back to that. While Phil's got it in front of him, I thought I'd ask about that one.
Simply any nonprofit museum, library, or art gallery and other similar use. So it's anticipated as being a structure, an institutional kind of structure, a library or art gallery, that kind of thing out. So the intent is that this is a more rural area, that you don't have that kind of traffic.
Well, and again, on cultural activity, I'm trying to imagine what, if they found the First Baptist Church there and maybe they wanted to buy the land and put up a little small museum.
Could be, yeah. Just like a special use.
Yeah, special use, that would give, it's zoning, right, for special use?
Because zoning, yeah.
It would give zoning a chance to evaluate it, and I mean, that's the way I feel, because that might be a nice thing to have down there.
I don't like the idea of not permitting culture. I don't think that's a really...
Pro-culture.
Have culture, you just can't actively have culture.
I don't agree with that.
Well, I guess it's not a question of culture, it's a question of whether you're going to permit a museum or something like that. And certainly we have areas where we would say, you know, a museum isn't a good idea here because you're going to need parking, you're going to have parking issues and things like that. So, you know...
You have a farm stand there that accommodates how many cars?
Well, I'm saying, in principle, the idea of cultural activity. Without having thought it through, I think it should be a special use, because I could imagine that it would be a good thing to have there.
I think so too.
But it might not be, depending on the circumstances.
Yeah.
For example, if it's going to affect the tortoises.
Yes.
That kind of.
But it should be able to be proposed and reviewed and...
Right, so it's, if we change that to special use permit.
Yeah.
The religious building?
Just keep it the same.
Is it special use? Is that accurate?
That's when I messed up. That's flipped again. So yeah, it was special use now.
Yeah, keep it as special use.
In fact, most zones, it's a special use or permitted use.
Right.
Well, the religious building should probably also then change, because if it is the site, a museum for the First Baptist Meeting House would be religious.
It's not permitted to have that foundation there.
Well, so both religious building and cultural activity set at special use?
Be careful about...
Keep it as special use? It's religious building?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So, I'm a very big supporter of religion. However, whenever you create an area where you can have religious buildings, we lose tax money, and I'm sort of a cheapskate.
It's the same with the museum, though.
Well, that's a not-for-profit. I don't know for certain that that's true. Not-for-profit doesn't necessarily mean no taxes.
Not automatic.
Yeah. So it's not automatic.
But yes, for religion, as long as it's used for religious purposes, it's automatic under state statute. Non-profit, and for educational purposes, it's automatic. But for non-profits, it's not automatic. They have to get a charter from the General Assembly or something to make them tax exempt.
I think that makes sense, religious buildings by special use. I think the reality is with the lot size we're demanding, pretty much all you're going to end up with is if they find that Baptist church and someone said, you know what, am this rich Baptist, I want to establish the meeting house again.
Yeah.
Far be it from us to 350 years later say they can't do that.
But we don't want the Crystal Palace or Crystal, whatever that thing was that was built in Arizona.
Like a cult compound
Yeah,
or something.
that's-
No,
The Northeast isn't an ideal place for those.
Can we keep the religious building as a special use and keep the cultural activity as a special use?
You had a question about the family daycare home. That generally is a permitted use in residential zones, like just permitted, not even special use.
Is there a number of kids that are allowed in the family daycare home description?
I thought I had it, where'd it go? Daycare, family daycare home. Any home other than the individual's home in which daycare in lieu of parental care or supervision is offered at the same time to 6 or fewer individuals who are not relatives of the caregiver, but may not contain more than a total of 8 individuals receiving daycare. And that's permitted and as a permitted use, even in our 40 zone, all the residential zones, including and also the neighborhood business zones, permitted use.
8 is the
8 total,
Yeah.
then 6 outside. 2 of them already live in the home anyway. There'd only be 6 other than one's own children coming to the home to
6
receive.
unrelated.
Yeah.
6 unrelated.
Knowing what a boon it was to be able to bring my 3-year-old to somebody else's house to play with other, 5 other 3-year-olds, I would say that should be.
Keep this a P. It's a P everywhere else in the zones. Yeah.
Phil, if I can jump in here, I think that if there's ever a question about whether it should or shouldn't, going with the special use is an easy default because it allows you to look at the individual circumstances around that one. If you permit it, then you're kind of losing some control. If you don't allow it, then you're restricting it. So by just defaulting to special use, it'll allow the zoning board to take a look at the specific issue to determine whether that fits that neighborhood.
I'm fine with a special use permit.
For a family daycare,
Yep.
as opposed to daycare center, which is broader. Yeah.
Bigger operation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of the other changes are listed here, including electric power substation, cellular communication. I think there's some limitations on how you can regulate that, but cellular communication antenna and arrays. Utility poles are special use. The idea is to minimize the infrastructure up there, including sewage pumping stations or lift stations. That's not needed because
there's no sewer.
Not permitted to extend that kind of infrastructure up there.
A heliport.
I'm afraid that bad news for Fort Town Farms. They can't put in a heliport. I know they're talking about doing that.
I noticed that on the page that's not on there, it does say it's a little hard to read, but it says electric generator is not permitted in the AR. I'm assuming that electric. I mean, you're not talking about like a home backup generator.
No, it's like a significant utility project. Generator. What was it called again? What's the category? What's the definition?
It was category public utility facilities, and it was electric generator. I just, nowadays with everything going out.
It's that's just a related residential use. That wouldn't be considered utility related.
Come to think about the heliport, there used to be an airstrip over there.
It was in Seacom.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's a non-permitted use in any, in all residential zones, so it's like everybody does a generator, so it's that's something that's much larger scale type of project, because you can put a generator at your house as of right.
Okay.
So that's it for the use table. Do you have any other questions about the changes?
Food preparation and/or sales.
Is this retail business? Yes.
Lost track of what zone we're looking at.
AR. So it's the one that's
AR, and
kind of
it says no, food is definitely prepared and sold at Fort Town Farm.
But that's in Seekonk. That's it.
What?
That's in Seekonk. The stand.
Oh my gosh, okay. All right. I thought a part of it was, but, okay.
Yeah, part of
farmland.
The farm is.
And they bring it across the border, prepare it. Smuggling.
I wonder if we could charge them.
Export that.
So the rest of the amendments include revising the use table and dimensional regulations just to add the RBF zone, which was adopted like a year ago. But that's just like more of a housekeeping item. It would also eliminate households as a specific use in the use table. It's a definition, but it's considered, a household is part of a two-family dwelling, or it's not really a separate identifiable use. The use as a household is the house. That was viewed as extraneous by the solicitor, assistant solicitor during the planning board discussion. And another kind of cleaning up recommendation in doing this review was to eliminate the minimum side yard setback that's tied to the frontage percentage of the frontage. So just established a specific side yard setback. Sometimes you can have a large amount of frontage, and your house be normally you'd have like maybe a 14-foot side yard setback, but because you have excessive frontage, you have to push it over maybe 40 feet or something like that. I've seen a situation when the person had two lots, conforming lots. He wanted to combine them, and with one house, it was a house on one lot and vacant lot, and in order to merge the two lots, add the land to the property, they had to go to the zoning board because this 10% frontage was making the house non-conforming by side yard setback. So this would clean that up. I think other towns do have the 10%. I think Bristol does, but this would just clarify what that side yard setback is.
Isn't there something about taking the average?
For a front yard setback?
Yeah.
In certain zones, yeah. Certain situations, yeah.
In comparison to neighboring?
Like a bay spring lot where you have whole areas that are encroaching in the front yard setback, you can take an average up to a certain amount.
Front steps.
Yeah.
But this would be the side yard setback that you're...
This is just a side yard setback definition, how that's, you just take away the 10% requirement.
It would, so, where is that language?
Page 15. Like the second to last line in the chart.
Yes, in a dimensional table.
Oh, that's accessory structure.
It's on page 14. Minimum width side yards. It just takes away where it exists, that 10% requirement.
It says it at is that 18 feet?
starting with, OSP, which is 18 feet, and it goes across.
Okay. So it takes away the percentage. I could see the issue where with
Just
the
have
combined lots.
That's your side yard setback. It's in that zone. It's not based on some calculation of the frontage. That was also recommended by the planning board. I think that's it.
I had a question about the maximum lot coverage. At 15%, that's 18,000 square feet footprint. Am I understanding that correctly?
Depending on the size of your lot.
Right, but if we're making it 120,000 square foot minimum,
But you're trying to avoid impacting existing residential existing houses that, if you
wondering if that's too big?
I think it's far, I would think it would be more like 3%.
Well, that's when you're throwing in existing houses into non-conforming situations, because you couldn't expand the footprint if you're throwing off that.
Oh, right. I see what you're saying. So, but how do we prevent someone from coming in and building a building, other than reason itself, building a building with a 18,000 square foot footprint?
I guess you could have that. The Papa John's guy might come up and try to do that. I don't know. Looking for a new house in
because that concerns me. I mean, I can see with a riding stable, which is now going to be permitted, that would be a huge building. But even at that, 18,000 square feet is enormous.
Yeah.
We capped that at 3,000 square feet. That's a barn structure.
Right.
In the other section.
So we could say, lesser of 15% or like a number.
Oh, the square footage was 15% of 40,000.
No, I was just thinking if you added maximum building lot coverage and you'd said the lesser of, for AR, the lesser of 15% or...
oh, right. I see what you're saying, Phil. So 15% of 40,000 would be 4,000, 6,000.
That's a pretty substantial footprint, too.
Yeah.
That's a two-story.
One-third the size. But
yeah. Or 6,000 square foot footprint, or 6,000 square feet.
Why don't we call it something more reasonable? I mean, I don't want to make anyone non-conforming who's already over there, but...
Well, that's what it is now. If you have a conforming lot, it's 6,000 square feet.
Yeah, you could do 6,000. So, yeah, I mean, you might as well. I mean, I can't see people building these things. I just don't want...
No, but it does, it makes sense.
Is that the overall square footage of the building or the square footage of the first floor?
That's the footprint, so the lot structure.
So, okay.
Makes sense.
We could do a 12,000 square foot.
I mean, that's still big.
Yeah.
It's very big.
Did you want to exempt barns from that? I mean, that's adding to the building lot ratio. But if you have a smaller 1 acre lot, are you putting a large barn on that? I'm just trying to think out loud about that, but you probably have a larger lot where it's not doesn't impact it. That's all the amendments.
Anything else?
Where do we land with the size? With the
Can they
footprint?
build a barn?
Yeah. Oh, so it was going to be the lesser of...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
15% or whatever it works out to on what's a 40? 6,000, right. So that's existing right now is 6,000 because it's a 40 zone. 15% would give you a 6,000 square foot building.
So you have 3,000. You can, without special use permit, you'd have a maximum of 3,000 square foot footprint for your barn, and then you have another 3,000 for a house. So.
6,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it's the lesser of, and 6,000 is always going to be the lesser of, because you can't have anything smaller now than 40. You can't have anything smaller than 120.
unless there's a substandard lot now, yeah.
So why not just go to 6,000?
Well, do we have a substandard lot that
You
would
do,
be impacted?
yeah. You have smaller lots toward the water that were platted a while ago, a long time ago.
So that was less than 40,000, so it would, 15% of it would actually be less than.
Oh, because there are currently some that are smaller than 40. Okay. Then, that makes sense.
So we would change that to the lesser of?
15% or 6,000?
Yes.
And they can always, if someone has an oversized lot, I think it seems you might make a case for a variance for that, the zoning board.
Would anyone from the public like to be heard on this? It is a public hearing. Seeing none, are we ready to vote on this one?
I'll make a motion to adopt 2019-17, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 185 zoning, establish agriculture rural zoning as amended.
And Kate,
Presented and amended?
yeah, as presented and amended, but can you also add, and that the council finds that the amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan?
There you go. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And no abstentions. The motion carries. Thank you. The next one is the public hearing. I'm opening the public hearing for 2019-25, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 179, Article 4, parking on Vermont Avenue. Would anyone from the public like to be heard on this? This is, I know that you're close, so please come forward.
I've shown you the pictures that we've taken,
Yes.
and would really like to have a no parking sign. Do I need to say more? I don't know.
I think this is actually more than a no parking sign. I think it's no parking and no
And
standing.
standing?
Yes.
That was your recommendation, and we'd love that.
Yeah, because I can easily imagine someone sitting in their car, I'm not parking, I'm standing, and then I don't want to even get into that.
Particularly when they're waiting for kids before and after school, so.
Sure, yeah.
Actually, to that point, and it's a bit of a grammar niche, but change it to and/or. Parking and or standing prohibited at all times, because otherwise I could say, well, I'm not parking and standing, I'm only standing.
Okay.
I don't think and or has that hurts it in any way, so I would support that.
Me too.
Do I need to do anything else?
Unless you want to.
We're just testing your dedication.
I have to come again, otherwise I'd have a sweater knit for everyone. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If I can refer to the memo from Chief DiCrescenzo, he recommends parking, standing, or stopping prohibited
Okay.
at all times.
So I would just make that and/or.
Yeah, right.
That'll work.
Parking, standing.
And or stopping. If you are on that road, you have to be rolling.
You got to be moving.
Over the kids.
Around.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, then I'm closing the public hearing. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt 2019-25, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 179, Article 4, parking as amended, presented and amended.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next one is set agenda for the public hearing for January 7. We will be talking about bees, tobacco products, and designated conservation areas.
We're also going to have the Amy Tucker Spencer Fund meeting
At 6:45.
at 6:45 on that. Thank you very much for adjusting that.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Anything else we want? And obviously, if you have anything you want to add to the agenda, just let me know. And we can certainly add it. But unless anyone has anything else,
Oh, my God.
does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.